I was 3 cups of cafe into a 12-hour shift when the whole concourse went quiet. Not normal quiet, not the tired hum of a docking station at low traffic, a quiet that felt like something pressing down on the air. I was leaning against the rail outside the cargo office on Kessel Station, waiting on a shipment manifest that was already 2 hours late. Kessel wasn't a big place. It was a stopover, a fueling point, the kind of station where 40 species passed through in a week, and nobody remembered your name. I'd been running supply routes out here for 3 years, long enough to know most of the regulars, long enough to know when something was wrong before I even understood what I was looking at. Across the concourse, near the noodle stall that always smelled like burnt garlic, a group of Vandrellan traders had backed a kid into the corner by the railing. I want to be clear about what I saw, because it matters. It wasn't a crowd of soldiers. It wasn't a war party. It was 4 traders, mid-tier, the kind who wear too much jewelry and talk too loud about deals they never actually close. Vandrellans are not a fighting species. They're merchants, mostly, but they have a temper, and they have a reputation for testing whoever's new at the table, especially anyone they think won't push back. The kid was maybe 10 years old, human, backpack half open, one strap hanging off her shoulder, headphones around her neck instead of on her ears, because she'd clearly been listening to something and gotten distracted by the noodle stall like every kid does. She wasn't anyone I knew, just a kid who'd wandered a few meters from wherever her guardian was, the way kids do, the way they've always done, in every species, on every world. One of the Vandrellans had grabbed her arm, not gently. I don't know exactly why. Later, station security pieced together that it started as some kind of point they were trying to make. Something about human weakness, about how soft and unprepared we were compared to species who'd fought wars for 1,000 years. They'd been drinking. They'd been talking too big at a table nearby, and somebody dared somebody, and the kid was just standing there, close enough, small enough, human enough. That's the part that still gets me. It wasn't planned. It was stupid and small and almost accidental, the kind of thing that happens when people who don't understand what they're dealing with decide to find out the hard way. I felt my body go still before my mind caught up. That's the honest way to describe it. I didn't think I should do something. My hands were already moving before the thought finished forming. I set down my cup. I don't even remember doing that. Someone told me afterward I put it down so carefully, like muscle memory, like some part of my brain had already filed away, put down anything you're holding as step 1. I looked around, and every human in that concourse was doing the same thing. There were maybe 15 of us, scattered across that section of the station. Dock workers, a couple of traders, an off-duty pilot in a flight jacket, an elderly woman I recognized from the noodle stall who ran the place most mornings. None of us knew each other. None of us had said a word. But in the space of about 4 seconds, every single human within sight of that railing had stopped whatever they were doing and turned toward the same spot. I want to try to explain what that felt like from the inside, because I think it's the part outsiders never really understand about us. There wasn't panic. There wasn't shouting. Nobody screamed for help. It was the opposite of what you'd expect from a species that's supposedly still new to the galaxy, still soft, still figuring out how the wider universe works. It was quiet. It was fast. It was almost eerily calm, and I think that calm is what unsettled the Vandrellans more than anything else could have. They'd expected fear. They got stillness instead. And stillness, when it's aimed at you with intent, is a lot more frightening than screaming. The pilot in the flight jacket was closest. He didn't run. He walked. Fast. Direct. The way you walk when you already know exactly where you're going, and exactly what you're about to do. I moved from my side. The old woman from the noodle stall came from hers, and I remember thinking, absurdly, that she must be 70 years old, and she was moving like she'd done this before. Like some old instinct had just switched on inside her. Station security noticed about 2 seconds after we did. I saw 2 guards near the far archway go for their comms, faces confused, unsure whether to call for backup or just watch. They didn't know the protocol for this, because there wasn't one. Nobody had ever needed one before. Not here. Not with humans. That's the thing about how we move when a child is in danger. It doesn't wait for an order. It doesn't wait for a plan. It's not organized by rank or by comms chatter. It happens the way a hand pulls back from something hot. Automatic, immediate, and shared by everyone within reach, as if we're all wired into the same nerve. I've read about it since, the science behind it, the old theories about why humans evolved this way. Something about how our children take so long to grow up, compared to almost every other species that ever survived long enough to build a civilization. Something about how a species that can't protect its young in that stretch of vulnerability simply doesn't get the chance to have grandchildren. It's not a moral choice. It's not bravery in the way stories usually describe bravery. It's older than that. It's underneath thought, the way breathing is underneath thought. Whatever the reason, in that moment on Kessel Station, it looked like this. The pilot reached the Vandrellen, holding the girl's arm first. He didn't say anything dramatic. He didn't shout a warning. He just put himself between the traitor and the kid, one hand closing gently but firmly around the traitor's wrist, guiding the grip open and away from her arm the way you'd calmly take a knife from someone who didn't realize they were still holding it. The traitor tried to pull back, confused, off balance, and found that he simply couldn't. Not because the pilot was impossibly strong, because the pilot's whole body had become an anchor, planted, unmovable, completely uninterested in negotiation. By then 3 more of us had arrived. The old woman went straight to the girl, not toward the traitors at all, and knelt down in front of her, blocking her view of what was happening with her own body, murmuring something too quiet for me to hear. I found out later she'd asked the girl her name, asked if she liked noodles, asked something small and ordinary, because the most important job in that whole scene wasn't dealing with the traitors. It was making sure the child never had to watch what came next. The remaining humans spread out, with a kind of quiet efficiency that still amazes me when I think back on it. 2 moved to the concourse exits, not blocking them exactly, just standing there in a way that made it clear nobody was leaving until this was sorted. One calmly informed the confused security officers, in their own trade language, exactly what had happened and exactly where to point their scanners for the recording footage. Another simply stood near the 2nd and 3rd Vandrellen traitors, arms loose, expression mild, radiating the specific kind of patience that made both of them decide, all on their own, that sitting down and staying very still was a good idea. Nobody shouted, nobody threw a punch. There was no chaos, no scramble, no shattered stalls or panic stampede. It was over in less time than it takes to order a meal. The 4 Vandrellen traitors ended up sitting on the floor of the concourse, backs against the railing, surrounded by calm, ordinary-looking humans who weren't touching them anymore, because they didn't need to. The message had already landed. Nobody was going anywhere until the people whose job it was to sort this out actually arrived. Station security got there almost 2 full minutes after the trouble started, and by then, there was nothing left for them to do except take statements and pull footage. I remember the look on the lead officer's face, a thrill, all folded plates and slow blinking eyes, as he took in the scene. 4 traitors sitting quietly on the ground. 15 or so humans standing around like they were waiting for a shuttle. A little girl eating a bun someone had produced from somewhere, sitting cross-legged next to the noodle stall like nothing at all had happened. He didn't understand what he was looking at, not at first. I don't think anyone who wasn't human really could. I found out later that the story spread through the station's public feed within the hour, and from there onto the wider trade networks within a day. Not because anyone made a big deal out of it. There was no press release, no formal statement. It was just footage, a still, quiet 2 minutes of human strangers converging without a word, resolving a situation without shouting or chaos, and then going right back to whatever they'd been doing before, like they'd just paused to let a shuttle pass. A Vandrellen trade envoy, someone senior enough that his opinion apparently mattered to a lot of people, watched the footage and said something that got repeated a lot after that. He said the frightening part wasn't the speed. Species everywhere have fast reflexes. The frightening part was the coordination without command, the calm without hesitation, and the complete absence of anger in the response. He said it looked less like a group of individuals reacting to a threat, and more like a single organism protecting a part of itself. I think that's close to the truth, honestly. Closer than most explanations I've heard since. What most other species build with training and hierarchy, and years of drilled discipline, we seem to carry somewhere further down, somewhere older, something that switches on the instant it's needed, and asks no permission first. It doesn't care about rank. It doesn't care whether you're a pilot or a noodle seller, or a cargo runner 3 cups of cafes into a long shift. It just needs you to be human, and it needs there to be a child who isn't safe. The girl's guardian showed up about 10 minutes later, out of breath, clearly having heard secondhand that something had happened near the noodle stall. By then, the girl was laughing at something the old woman had said, bun in one hand, completely unbothered, more interested in finishing her food than in anything that had gone on around her. That, more than anything else, told me the whole thing had worked exactly the way it was supposed to. She never even had to be frightened. The adults around her had simply absorbed the entire event before it could reach her. I've thought about that day a lot since then. Not because it was dramatic. By the time it was over, it barely qualified as an incident at all, more like an interruption in an otherwise ordinary afternoon. What stays with me is how unremarkable it felt to everyone involved once it had passed. Nobody talked about it like it was heroic. The pilot went back to his ship. The old woman went back to her noodle stall and had a line of customers within the hour. I went back to waiting on my shipment, which, for the record, arrived 3 hours late and short 2 crates. Other species keep asking about it though, traders, diplomats, curious travelers who've seen the footage and want to know if it's really true, if humans really respond like that, every time, without hesitation, without needing to be told. I never know exactly how to answer that in a way that makes sense to them. The best I can usually do is shrug and tell them the truth as plainly as I know it. To us, it wasn't a warning to the galaxy. It wasn't a display of strength or a lesson we meant to teach anyone. It was just an ordinary Tuesday, and a kid who needed help got it, faster than thought, from strangers who never had to be asked.